monthly meeting.
Thank you for having it.
So sweet. Thank you for spending your Friday morning with us. How many of you can agree that Friday is just a really hard day in the week? And we could just really use this hour to recharge, to power through, and finish out the week strong. A lot of you may work on the weekend, so hopefully this is an uplifting meeting for you so that you can power through and get through the week. For those of you who are first-timers, thank you so much and welcome. Pastor Joe and Barbara have a lovely gift in the back, so before you leave, if you haven't received your gift yet, please grab it off the back table. If you've also brought your business card and you haven't done so, please place it on our lovely corkboard that's filling up so nicely in the back. And please use that as a space where if you need something in some part of your life, you need your lawn cut, you need your gutters cleaned, that you can go to that board and there are business cards for almost every aspect of what you could need. Yes, and so we just want to also share that after the meeting today, we are going to be praying for anybody that might want prayer. So if you feel like you need prayer, please don't take your burdens with you and stay after for a couple minutes and we'll pray for you. And we are just going to dive right in. We're going to have Pastor Joe come up and he's going to have some opening comments for you. And then we're going to dive into our second panel. Amen. All right, Pastor Joe, thank you. Look, we finished before 9:30. You're doing great. So now we're going to meet our seasoned panelists, starting out with Pastor Joe. He brings a wealth of experience to the table. He and his wife, Barbara, are an inspiring couple who seamlessly blended faith and business in the community of Brick. Their journey is a testament to the power of combining principles of faith with sound business practices, and we're eager to hear the insights Pastor Joe will share with us. After 46 years of marriage, I know he has much wisdom that he can share about life and business as well. Next on our panel is Mike Viola, a true veteran in the world of business with over 30 years of experience as a business owner. Michael's story is one of resilience from being deep in debt to now living debt-free. Not only is he a thriving entrepreneur, but he is also a campus pastor at our Bayville campus and leader in various business associations. Joining us today is Rick Tokarski, the visionary behind Tokarski-Millemann Architects. Rick has a thriving 10-person team handling an impressive 120 projects annually. His dedication to his craft is rivaled only by his commitment to community service with involvement in architectural associations, disaster relief organizations, and church ministries. And last but not least, there's me. I'm Carolyn Gargiulo. I'm not as seasoned as all these wonderful people up here. But I was actually a Spanish teacher for 14 years. And about 7-8 years ago, I dove into real estate. At the time, I was still loving my teaching career, and I loved helping people buy and sell houses. But then I felt the Lord about 2 years ago start pulling me into full-time real estate, and a huge leap of faith. And I'm standing before you today as just a full-time realtor. So. I'll share that story hopefully one day a little bit more in depth, but for now, that's it. So we're going to get started with our first question. How do you balance your work life with your home life?
So this one really hit me when they were kind of talking about the questions, and I will right now say I'm not the poster boy for balance. I will give some advice on this. When you always talk about life-work balance, it's like, okay, let's put our job in an 8-hour box 5 days a week, and that's what balance means. I think I had to come about this at a different angle. I would say, for me, my balance, and I can do that? No way. I ground it out. I was grinding for a good 10, 15 years. Now I think I've achieved this somewhat level of balance where I'm not I don't work weekends anymore, which is huge for me. However, through that, the balance that I think was able to make me successful, my marriage successful, is, having a good communication with your spouse in terms of, prioritizing your family. I was able, because I was self-employed, for those important times for the kids, I could take off and be there. So, being there for your kids, you get one opportunity, you need to be there. Also, keeping a good dialogue between you and your spouse about, when is this getting too much? When do I need to be here? And her saying, okay, you need to go into work tonight till 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm good. This is what I need, blah, blah, blah. And just having that relationship of back and forth of balance with your spouse of, what can they tolerate, and, when can you be released to go and work on the job, and when do you need to be home? Kind of, on top of that, just keeping in order your priorities and, putting God first, your spouse second, your kids third, your job fourth, and then your ministry fifth. And I've always kind of adhered to that, and it's definitely, for me, it's been a plan of success, and I highly recommend that order.
Balance. I love that word, balance. So being married for, gosh, what are we on, 29 years, going on 30 years already, and knowing my wife for so many years, especially in the beginning of our business, there is a season where you're a little bit out of balance. And that's okay. God gives you the grace for that season. That's a season, though. Don't get caught in that season for longer than you need to be caught in that season. Because if you get caught there for too long, you start getting frustrated. Your spouse starts getting frustrated. It catches up to you over time. You become exhausted from business. You start making bad decisions in business because of exhaustion. And that happens to almost every business owner that I have seen, where they get so caught up in business and they put everything else aside. But the most important thing that you need to understand is that God comes first in our life. Even in business, He comes first. You need to be able to prioritize God first, and then your family, as Rick was talking about. And so, yes, there might be a season where you're slightly out of balance, but be very careful that that season doesn't go longer than it really should go. I'll let you pick that up.
As I'm sitting here listening, now I'm in a totally different season now than when we first started the church, and even when I was in business. I've been in business since I'm 19 years old, so this is not anything new. And so, having been in business for that long, you start recognizing some things after you're in it a couple of decades. You guys, you're pretty much now, all your kids are off in college and stuff, and your kids are a little bit older. But it's much tougher when your children are small. But that's when being in your own business really helps you, in a sense, because you can be a little bit more flexible. If you're on a 9-to-5 job working for some big corporation, so you can't tell them, hey, listen, my kid's got a baseball game, I want to go. They'll say, well, clean your desk and go watch a baseball game. So in a real sense, it's not a bad thing being in your own business, being self-employed, because you can kind of shift things around. Now, I will say this, just the word balance. If I'm standing completely sure-footed, solid, that's not balance. This just it's the way you stand. And usually when you can stand that way when there's nothing pulling you one way or the other. The balance has to come when you recognize, okay, and as it involves your family or your spouse or whatever, okay, listen, let's recognize the seasons that we're in. Okay, there's seasons in the spiritual realm just like there's seasons in the natural realm. So when you're in a season of planting, then you gather your family around and go, okay, just like if you were working on a farm. The scriptures very much, are written in an agricultural society for the most part, so they understood this. Okay, it's time to plant. So let's all get out there. We're going to get a few hours sleep at night, but for the most part, we're going to spend the next 20 hours planting, but we're going to do it together. And so in that case, now you lean into your planting season, right? You understand, okay? If a person's birthday falls within that season, well, maybe we're not going to celebrate it this week. We're going to celebrate it next week. Okay, and anybody that has a birthday like around Christmas time, you know exactly what I'm talking about because we do that anyway. Okay, now the seasons change, and now you might be in that time period where you planted. Now there's a little bit of time before it becomes harvest time. So that's when you're going to take your time with your family. That's when you're going to go on your vacation if you can afford to go on a vacation. That's when you're going to kind of sit back and spend some time. But now recognize that season's going to change again. Now it's going to become harvest time. And when it's harvest time, everything falls by the wayside. You get out there, you pull in the harvest, because if you don't, it's going to rot on the vine. So I think balance is more, number one, if you're married, if you have a family, especially if you have younger children, I would say try to include them as much as possible, because now everybody's fulfilling a cause. And a cause will cause people to rally by your side, because you're doing it together. If there are sacrifices, you're doing it together. I forget who I was saying this to just a little while ago. My wife and I have worked side by side, even from before we were married. You know, I opened up my first business, like I said, when I was 19. So she would come and help me sometimes. And then, so that bled into our marriage. And then, you know, when it was time where she left the corporation she was working for and came to work with me full time, you know, we started having children. It was always, all right, we know this is what we got to do, because we like to eat, we like to have a house, and we like to have a couple of bucks in our pocket. So you lean in that direction. I think what ends up happening, where it becomes a difficulty, is something that's very unique to our culture in the past 20 years, where you have fractured households. You have the husband is going off in his career, the wife's going off in her career, the kids are being dumped someplace to raise, and there's no family cohesion. When there's family cohesion, you endure suffering together, you endure sacrifice together, you endure harvest together, you endure the celebrations together. I think that will help to try to avoid a lot of the difficulties and conflicts and the stress and the strife. And then you could even have competition enter into a husband and wife relationship, because the wife has a career, the husband has a career, they might be diverse. But I believe that the pattern that brings us some safety is a pattern that we see in the scriptures. God speaks to Abraham, but God doesn't only speak about Abraham. He speaks about Abraham, about Isaac, about Jacob, and then Jacob with his 12 sons. It's a family thing. Most of the people that made up Jesus' immediate, the disciples, were all related. They're brothers, they're cousins. It's a family thing. Make it a family thing. Make it a family thing. And that will help some of those rough spots. Where it's, well, how come you couldn't be at my game? Or how come you couldn't do this? Or, you know, why can't we go on vacation at this time of the year? Well, because it's the biggest time of the year. You know, when I was in business, and I don't want to spend a lot of time here, Christmas is for us. I said to my wife, this is way before I became a Christian. I said to my wife, we should become Russian Orthodox so we celebrate all the holidays the week after everybody else. Because being in the food business, the biggest times of the year were Christmas and Easter, especially in the food, you know, especially with Italian, when you're dealing with Italian clientele. Christmas Eve is a big deal. Christmas Day is a big deal. Thanksgiving, it's all right. But Easter and Christmas, so we never planned anything around Christmas time. They knew, even Christmas Eve dinner, my wife knew, I'm going to come off of 72 hours straight of working. Don't expect me to be the life of the party at Christmas Eve. So we all understood that. My in-laws understood that. Our families understood that. So it's really bringing everybody in with you, so it doesn't become a me against them. And now you're in the position to have to defend your business, which is bringing your family a nice lifestyle, but they're seeing it as a thing that's keeping you away from them. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Involve as much as your family, involve your spouse, involve those that you love, involve them as much as possible in what you're doing, and that kind of relieves that competitive edge. So.
Can you guys hear me? There it is. What I love that you said, Pastor, is that the Lord calls family together. If you look in the Bible, and you look at Jesus' family, he had 4 brothers. I don't know if we all realize that. And it said, the Bible says he has sisters, so it's plural. So there was Joseph, there was Simeon, there was James, there was Jude. They didn't believe in him till after his death, burial, and resurrection. They thought he was crazy. A matter of fact, they were probably helping the scribes and the Pharisees at that point to take Jesus out because they thought he was crazy at that point. Yet Jesus appears to James after his resurrection, and James finally believes in him. James becomes a pastor in a church. I forget which church he pastored, Jerusalem church. And then Jude, they both write books of the Bible. Jesus always calls families. He doesn't just call one person into business. He's calling your family together as one. And you need to include your spouse, like Rick was saying, in that. Include the vision. Share the vision. Share while you're putting extra hours into the business so they understand. And together you accomplish your goals and your visions. Because if you're just going to do it by yourself, again, that competition starts to roll in, and then all of a sudden you're battling each other instead of going in the direction that God's calling you to go.
No matter what success you attain, God can't get any glory out of it because it's filled with strife, it's filled with division, it's filled with bitterness. It just can't happen that way.
Yeah.
So,
Amen. That's good.
That's
No.
really good. I
does
just want
anybody
to.
have any questions or anything, or comments, or you want anything clarified? Chuck?
You hear all the time, don't mix family with business. You hear that, right, from like in the world or whatever. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I hear that from time to time, right? It's almost like a thing that people said. You know, we're actually, as you're speaking, literally just officially hired my wife to do operational duties. So now I got to figure out how that works. And it's good. It's just a good thing. But like, how do I as a CEO, you know, when we have people that manage different things, how do I, balance that?
Can I add something to that?
I speak in tones to my wife, different than I speak to him.
Well,
On an island by myself.
first of all, Chuck, don't go into it with that philosophy. That philosophy is
Disagree with it, yes.
that's
Yeah.
totally unscriptural. Totally unscriptural. Okay, you want to include, and I'll tell you why. One of the main reasons, something that we spoke about here a couple of meetings ago. Anything that God calls to come to pass can never be accomplished in one generation. It always requires more generations. You cannot accomplish what God's really called you to in one generation. There's not enough time. So it's what you're doing. If you wanted to have sustainability, then automatically build into it that it's going to be multi-generational. And then, therefore, there's going to come a time where you might have to train hands-on. You can step back and go, okay, this is how you handle it. This is if you're going to go negotiate for a wedding. This is what you're going to do. Here's the contracts we use. Make sure you have the agreements. Make sure the bride and groom understand exactly whoever's hosting the party. Chucky's a phenomenal DJ if anybody ever needs one. You just did my nephew's wedding, right? Yeah. Always phenomenal. So again, you're just using that business. It's counterproductive. It's just counterproductive to keep things separate. What are you going to celebrate? Okay, there's nothing to celebrate. If you're doing your own thing, your wife's doing her own thing, you got kids once they grow up, they're doing their own thing. You come together at the table, now you're in competition. Well, my business is doing better than yours, and yours is not. And if you're not doing good, then you feel resentment. That's just a setup from the enemy, just to have division and strife in the family. You probably wouldn't have grown up this way because your dad's an accountant. You might, if your kids follow you into the business, or you have a brother that's kind of somewhat in the business. When you sat down at dinner with our families, what we heard was the latest job that my dad was doing, how much concrete he poured, how much money he made, how many bricks they had to order. Everybody was involved in the discussion. Okay, but when he accomplished something, we were all proud of what he accomplished, because we were all in the middle of it. I think if we pursue that, That's going to relieve a lot of the division and strife and competition. And even if we do fall short, and we're going to fall short in some areas, there's other areas that are going to compensate for that. Okay, you got your son involved in the business now. So I'm sure, the discussions of how things are running don't stay in the office. I'm sure when you get home, you're like, hey, did you follow up this phone call? Did you go for this estimate? And hey, this person came in and needs this much, 50 bundles of shingles. And so now you're all celebrating together. It's the way it should be.
Absolutely.
I think that family and business phrase is like, I know as my children were growing up and I was in business, they would be like, Mom, we even go to the Bahamas and you know somebody there and you talk about business. So it's like that special family thing. And I really think that means like when your family knows this is family time, that you keep it family time, you honor the family, and you keep business unless it's an emergency in its little special pocket. But they should also know your goals and your visions and your dreams for what, you want to accomplish together. And they know what they'll receive as a result of what you've accomplished.
We have another question back there.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. I think the check for me and my spirit is when I feel driven. I mean, we're not a driven people, we're a led people. And it's really important to make the business go. And we really can go all in psychologically. But when we find that, of course, we're trusting in ourselves and not God. We've taken him off the throne. So that's, to me, I just want to point out that word driven because it's huge.
Thank you for sharing this. That's very important.
Do we have any other?
By nature, just by nature, you're here this morning because you have a dream you want to accomplish. So by nature, it's very easy for us to fall into that driven thing. And you're right. The enemy drives us. The Spirit of God leads us. He'll show us. He'll kind of like draw our hearts to something. So thank you. Thanks, Ed, for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's a very important principle that we can never forget. Because by nature, we are all that type of people. We'll go for the bait like that and just boom, run with it. And, my wife, she knows it. She'll look at me across the table or whatever and go, what are you planning now? Because she knows that the wheels are turning, We're just that way, So thank you. We need that. Again, the balance, like you said, the balance is knowing when to lean in that direction and when to let the family talk about whatever they want to talk about or engage in whatever they want to engage in. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to share? Because I think we have other questions.
All right, why don't we go to the other question?
No, I'm not. If you want to, go ahead.
I've been in business with my wife now for, my gosh, over 20 years. And in the beginning, we're both pretty passionate about our direction we both like to go in. And working together, we've learned how to do that throughout the years. It isn't something that comes, what's the word I'm looking for? Just naturally, thank you. Big word, right? It's not something that comes naturally. It's something that we learn through time. How to respect one another at the workplace, how to listen to one another, hear each other's heart, and then come to an agreement. And that's something that we've learned to do over time. Just like you learn to be married, you learn to raise your children. You could read books on it, but when you're going through it and you're walking through it is really when you learn. And so don't feel like you need to have all the answers as you're walking through it right now. I need to know everything about it. God will show you. I love that. He leads you. He guides you. He teaches you through the Holy Spirit. And he will do that even in business, Chuck. As you're working with your wife in business, he's going to lead you. He's going to guide you. But one of the most important things is to learn to listen as well. So,
Thank you so much. I think if you're also single and you're sitting here, that this applies to you. We're learning, I'm single and I'm learning this now for my future when I do get married. So if you were sitting here and you were like, oh, that doesn't apply to me, it absolutely applies to you as well. I also made a promise I was going to get to question number 2 this time, so I'm going to go right into it. Are you intentional about rest time, the Sabbath? Are you intentional about rest time, Sabbath time? Yeah, rest. That's an English word.
What is this word you speak of? Again, not the poster boy. Intentional. I guess, a little bit by nature, somewhat of a workaholic, let's call it. Let's lay it on the table. I enjoy what I do, which makes it even worse. I get fed off of architecture and the things I do. It invigorates me. It's a big part of who I am. So, my wife's always like, okay, why don't you just rest? I'm like, I don't like resting. It doesn't resonate with me. However, over time, I'm able to, not work on the weekends. Probably for the last, 7, 8 years, I've gotten to the point where I have a big enough team around me that we can get the workload done, because I realize I can't do it all myself. So taking the weekends to spend more time with my family, is rest. I don't sit around and do nothing, but I'm not doing work necessarily. So that time doing other things, having hobbies, spending time with my family, is kind of, let's call it the rest that kind of helps revigorate you for the going into the week refreshed.
We look at our culture today. When you ask someone, how you doing? What's the first thing they say? I'm busy, busy. We're so used to staying busy in our culture that if we're not busy doing something, we feel like something is wrong. Yeah, you do. You literally feel guilty, like something is not right. I'm not doing something. To rest goes completely against our culture. But when you look at the Word of God, when Jesus formed this planet, God the Father and God the Son and the Holy Spirit were there. And on the seventh day, they did what?
Rest.
They rested. It's called the Sabbath. They rested on the seventh day. That's the example to us. And you kind of said it. You need to be intentional about it because our culture goes against that. And today we see parents teaching their children to be busy. That every minute of the day you should be doing something. And what's going to happen when those kids grow up? They're going to put God to the side and they're going to be busy. And that completely goes against what God says in His Word.
We've developed a society that puts so much emphasis on leisure time, but never gets any rest. Everything's about leisure, 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 leisure. Entertainment, leisure, going out to dinner 5 times a week, and going to this island and that island, and traveling here and there. And it's just so much, it becomes a status symbol. But yet there's hardly any rest. And truthfully, rest comes when there's an absence of frustration. That's why you can be, on the outside, we're looking at you going, he's busy, he's always looking at plans and always looking at houses. But you find fulfillment in that, and therefore your soul finds some rest. Rest isn't necessarily just laying down, not doing anything. Rest is unplugging from the areas that maybe are causing stress and plugging into something that's going to bring contentment and fulfillment. And that alone brings rest. All right, Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Come to me, all you who labor, and are heavy laden. There's 2 different things. You could be laboring but not being heavy laden. And you can be heavy laden and not getting anything done. It's the idea of connecting with Him, drawing life from Him, walking a path that He leads you on and He directs you on, so that you can experience contentment and fulfillment. Because there, you could be working 24 hours a day, but be at rest. Somebody said, if you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life. Amen. So he goes on to say, take my yoke, and it's not talking about eggs, it's talking about, in other words, connect with me and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, or meek, and you will find rest. Rest is something that we find. It's not something that comes automatic. Just because, I know, you're in the same boat that I am on Sunday afternoons. Okay, after you do the service in Bayville, by 2 o'clock, well, you get done earlier, so probably by 1 o'clock, you're starting to melt. Because so that's our thing. It's Sunday afternoon. My wife knows, don't pay attention to me for about 2 or 3 hours. I'm out. After that, then I'll start pacing the house because now I'm looking for something to do because I got 2 or 3 hour nap or something like that. But just laying on a couch or whatever, that doesn't necessarily bring you rest. Because if you're carrying all the weight of everything that you do all the rest of the week while you're supposedly immobile, it still doesn't equal rest. Rest comes when we connect with Him. We find rest in Him. And that's one of the greatest ways to find out, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? If there's no peace, if it's a constant stress, if it's constant turmoil or worry or concern or pressure, you might want to check if this is exactly what God has actually had me do right now. Yeah. So, because He said we're going to find rest. Amen? Anybody want to answer that?
Hi, I just wanted to add to that. I'm Jenna. How are you, everybody? So my husband and I, just to piggyback kind of a little bit off of what Jenny was saying, is we have 3 little boys, and of course they're all in travel ice hockey, which is the cheapest sport. I'm just kidding. But just as I'm also in real estate. I started out as a teacher just like Caroline as well, and God had other plans for me. But we also, just as we would prepare for a meeting or something with a client, we prepare for our rest. We take it just as seriously as we do a meeting. So if we know on Sunday is our day of rest, we're preparing. We're getting the children excited for it. We're going to start with lunch. We're going to go to the park. So we prepare in a different way, in a different platform, but there's also preparation with that to make it meaningful. As Pastor Joe said, when you're just laying on the couch because you're physically at rest, your mind is racing because you're like, gosh, I could be doing so many things right now, and it becomes counterproductive. So whether it's your family or your children or your spouse or just for your own personal well-being, we prepare for our time of rest, looking forward to it, just as much as we would a meeting. And that's really helped us too. The kids get excited. They know and they look forward to, this is when we're doing this. This is when we're together. No, I'm going to block this off. I can't go to Susie's house. This is when we're together. We have fun. And it's awesome. It's really worked. So hope that was helpful.
Thanks, Jenna.
Hello, everybody. My name is Linda, and I come from a generation where people used to play checkers together. So, it's bringing me back to what is rest, right? And because now, being an entrepreneur, I find that, yes, I do rest and think about many things other than business. But when I think about how people used to really rest, ask people, what is their hobby? Right? Does someone have a hobby? Some people garden. Some people, I guess, play pickleball now, depending on that sport. But God will align you where you are to be. So I think if your heart is open and you listen to what the Holy Spirit is leading you to, your vision can be in rest. Sometimes you have to share that with your family because your family needs to know your vision in order for you to be able to be aligned so that you can do restful things together. I mean, when I was young, I was a jacks champion. I don't know, does anybody know what that is? I mean, I'm just saying that, those things are what used to be rest, but they were shared with the family. So it's so important what you said, Pastor Joe and Mike and Rick, family time, but individually letting people know how you want to rest so that they can support you in that. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jill. This is my first time here. I'm super excited. I wanted to pass on something that I had heard at a sermon at a different church a long, long time ago that was truly life-changing for me. And it was the message that God had 10 commandments. The 4th commandment is to remember the Sabbath. And when this pastor shared a long time ago, he said, just like anybody would not even think of breaking the other commandments, like you would never murder someone, you wouldn't steal, right? You would never think to do that, ever. But in our culture, we seem to blow over the 4th commandment of honoring the Sabbath. And it blew my mind. And then he basically taught us how to honor the Sabbath. And it is borrowing a page out of our Jewish brothers and sisters. And he had made this suggestion. He recommended a few different books. But what I do, and I want to just offer this because it was literally life-changing for me. I do my schedule every week, like most of us. And on Friday night, it doesn't have to be Friday night, by the way, but for me, it's just this thing that I do. At 6 o'clock on Friday night to 6 o'clock on Saturday night, I prioritize things that bring me joy, things that feel fulfilling. Family, I might go to the gym, I might watch a movie, like our family has people over, like whatever we do, the priority is to rest. And I have to tell you, it was life-changing because what ended up happening was, because I honored God in that Sabbath, God made me 10 times more productive the rest of the week. And that is the blessing, because he sees that you are faithful. He sees that you are honoring him by carving out that time. And he's like, I will bless you now. And that is exactly what started happening. I was 10 times more productive, more focused, more energized. I was excited. Like, I got up and just was like, woohoo, right? Like, go, this is awesome. Like, and I was like, when I realized I was rewarded, it was like kind of when you tithe, right? God's like, test me on this. And you tithe, and suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, money is overflowing in your barn. And that's exactly what happens when you honor the Sabbath. Your energy, your focus, everything is blessed. So that's what I want to share.
Jill, I want to come on the heels of that. So I have this on my phone. It's all the names of Jesus. And one of them is, Jesus is my resting place. And so when I've been in the entrepreneurial world since I'm 19 years old as well. When I took Jesus and I put my trust in him, he said, will you trust me? And we went down this path, and he said, why don't you trust me? And I said, because you take too long. So I ended up moving into the driven position of life. And as an entrepreneur, I saw a lot of people merchandising Jesus, and it didn't settle well with me. And so I decided to put my faith in him. It's when I put my faith in him completely, he showed me who I was in him. He gave me an identity from a position of who he is. And in that resting place, he now told me my purpose, what to drive for, but I drive for it in rest. And so when I rest with him for not just the day, but I actually have a pillow, and anybody that knows me in business, I would even do it as a paralegal. Underneath my desk, I would rest with a pillow 30 minutes a day. I wasn't sleeping. I was so busy over here that I needed to rest in Jesus to have him get to my heart and my conscience so I could rest for the rest of the hours. But when I rest in the day, on a specific day, I'm not doing anything. It's called the Sabbath. I'm resting in Jesus. He is my bread of life. That is where everything that he does, I have enough revenue income from all the things that I've done. I'm now creating a ministry called Pause on Purpose. It's Vision Ignites Power, and I do women's retreats all over the country. I can only do that because of where the Lord took me in the rest and how he led me, that I have enough streams of income that I can now go all over the country and I can help people get into that position of pausing on purpose. And that's what it's called, to rest at his feet. It's called faith. It's what Abraham did. It's what Jacob did. It's not, and I'm not disrespecting resting, going to the gym or resting, but it's called the Sabbath. And when he is called our resting place, he is the bread of life. I'm telling you, I'll go in the morning and my kids think, what is mom doing? Does she ever even work? Where does she even get money to go on vacation 3 times a year? How do we do this? It's because I may spend 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours resting in the Lord, worshiping in my bedroom, on the floor, reading my Bible. I'm resting in him for 8 hours a day. But he collapses time, and what he does, what I do in 8 hours a day, he can move mountains in an hour. So, resting place. He's our resting place.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Unfortunately, we've run out of time again, so let's just give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much. Yay, we made it to question number 2. Anyway, just a special announcement. We're going to have an evening meeting for those of you who are dual careers. It's going to be November 30th at 6 p.m. I encourage you, even if you came to this meeting, to come to the 30th meeting and bring a friend that might be dual careered. We also have a full dinner buffet, and it's going to be great. So come join us. 6. If you don't follow us on social media already, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook to keep up to date on events and also to be encouraged with some tips. You can stay afterwards. We're not kicking you out. You can stay and network with everybody, continue eating, drinking, whatever it is you want to do. And don't forget, if you need prayer for anything, please come up and we'll pray for you. All right, thanks so much.